Over the last couple of weeks, Americans have been stunned to witness terrible acts of violence, destruction of property, and looting throughout the major cities of the United States, ostensibly a reaction to a belief that the death of George Floyd, who was in police custody, was racially motivated. Subsequently, self-proclaimed angry spokesmen have demanded that monuments be removed, that names of places changed to reflect their particular political sensibilities. We sit in our living rooms and wonder, what is to be done? How do we stop the destruction of property, history, and culture? What can I do to make a difference? Although we live in a free society open to legitimate, peaceful protest, it seems as though the events we are experiencing today have a mob mentality filled with rage and anger. The Book of Mormon teaches us, "He that hath the spirit of contention is not of me, but is of the devil, who is the father of contention, and he stirreth up the hearts of men to contend with anger one with another." We also know from the book of Isaiah that there will be times when people arise who call good evil and evil good. I believe that now is such a time. So what is our responsibility? 18th century British statesman Edmund Burke provided a concise answer to this question. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Our obligation, as defined by the scriptures and pronouncements of God's prophets, is to obey the two great commandments, to love God and love our neighbor, to stand for what is good and right by acting within our circle of influence, and thereby making a difference in this life. As members of the church, we have been taught how fundamental remembering is to the gospel. Elder Marlon K. Jensen explained it this way: remembering the past gives us needed perspective as God's children to have faith in our future destiny and thus to live more faithfully in the present. But remembering is not only important in a religious framework. In 1884, Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., a Union Army veteran, spoke specifically about the role of monuments, believing that these monuments would be worth more by way of chastening and inspiration than the monuments of another 100 years of peaceful life could be. So do we destroy history because we perceive mistakes in the past? No, we remember and learn from it. Poet Maya Angelou said it well. "I did then what I knew how to do. Now that I know better, I do better." More recently, the Archbishop of New York, Timothy Cardinal Dolan, wrote, "As a historian by training, I want to remember the good and the bad and recall with gratitude even how people who have an undeniable dark side can let light prevail and leave the world better. I want to keep bringing classes of school children to view such monuments and to explain to them how even such giants in our history had crimes, unjust acts, and plain poor judgment mixed in with the good we honor. As part of our remembering, members of the church have a unique spiritual understanding of our founding fathers and the Constitution. We read in the Doctrine and Covenants, according to the laws and constitution of the people, which I have suffered to be established and should be maintained for the rights and protection of all flesh, according to just and holy principles. And for this purpose have I established the constitution of this land by the hands of wise men, whom I raised up unto this very purpose." Elder Wilford Woodruff bore powerful testimony in General Conference in April 1898 to the importance of the founders of this country when they appeared to him in the St. George Temple 21 years previously in 1877. "I am going to bear my testimony to this assembly, if I never do it again in my life, that those men who laid the foundation of this American government and signed the Declaration of Independence were the best spirits the God of heaven could find on the face of the earth. They were choice spirits, not wicked men. General Washington and all the men that labored for this purpose were inspired of the Lord. In addition to loving God and our neighbor and making a difference for the right and good by acting within our sphere of influence, we must also recognize that doing evil in response to evil is ethically and morally wrong and must be condemned. The Lord taught in the Sermon on the Mount the injunction that has come to be known as the source of the Golden Rule and embodies the ethical standard expressing the love of God and man contained in the two great commandments. President Russell M. Nelson has observed, never has one wrong been corrected by a second wrong. Evil has never been resolved by more evil. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. taught, hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. The quote, resentment is like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies, comes from Nelson Mandela, who sought reconciliation rather than revenge and ushered in a period of peace and harmony during the critical transition of governments in South Africa. In a talk given by President Ezra Taft Benson, he tells us how we as citizens can express our love of God and our neighbor and act within our sphere of influence to make a difference in this life. We must become involved in civic affairs to see that we are properly represented. Not only does the Lord hold us accountable for our acts in relationship to both making laws and administering them, but he has counseled us as to the qualities of those who represent us. Today, I leave you with this important thought, articulated by author Edward Everett Hale, who expressed the duty we each have a responsibility to fulfill. I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something that I can do.